Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. Now, this is probably the Shakespeare play that I know the best, because when I was an undergrad, back in 2008, I think it was, I played Caliban in a production of The Tempest. And so reading the play over and over and over again, and then going through rehearsals, etc., I had a lot of time to reflect on this play and what it's about, what it's interested in, etc., etc. There's a lot that I have theoretically to say about The Tempest, and in the interest of keeping this video at a practical length, I'm not going to say anywhere near all that I have to say about it, but there's a couple of things that I think are really, really important to talk about with The Tempest. So, first off, this is a romance. This is a late career play, probably Shakespeare's last play that he wrote by himself. Although the dates are not 100% clear, but he very possibly / very likely collaborated on a couple of plays after The Tempest, but this is probably his last solo play. It premieres around 1610, 1611. Right before Shakespeare retires. It's often seen as his sort of farewell to the theater, and it is a very theatrical, meta-theatrical play. Basically, the hero of the play, and I'll put hero in scare quotes because I have huge problems with this character. But the hero of the play is Prospero. He had been the Duke of Milan, but because he basically was like, yeah, I just wanted to stay in my library and learn stuff. And so I made my brother do all the work of being Duke while I continued to be Duke in name and title. He maintained the titles and honors of being Duke without doing any of the responsibility. And so his brother Antonio, somewhat reasonably in my estimation, said, why don't I just be Duke? And so he aligned himself with Alonso, King of Naples, and they basically launched a coup against Prospero, putting Prospero and his infant daughter, his 3-year-old daughter, Miranda, into a boat, basically being like, best of luck, off into the ocean with you. Prospero and Miranda land on an island somewhere in the Mediterranean, between Milan and Tunis in North Africa. And Prospero basically becomes king of the island through the use of his magic sorcery. His subjects on the island include, obviously his daughter, whom he raises, Ariel, who's an airy spirit that he frees from a tree, where Ariel, he, she, they. Ariel's gender is very ambivalent, and often in performance, Ariel has been played by male actors, female actors, androgynous actors, probably non-binary. Anybody across the spectrum can play Ariel very fittingly. So Prospero has Ariel, who is his sort of magical servant. Ariel wants to be freed from Prospero's rule, but because Prospero freed Ariel from this tree, he extracts a period of magical service from them, and that period seems to be set largely by Prospero's whim. And then you've got Caliban. Caliban is the son of the witch Sycorax, who had been exiled from Tunis to this island. It's not 100% clear who his father is. Prospero says it's the devil, but you know what? he does. Prospero says a lot of very uncomplimentary things about Caliban, and Caliban has been, in the 20th and 21st centuries especially, Caliban has been embraced by post-colonial scholars as a sort of great representative of the colonized and suppressed indigenous peoples, whether that be Amy César's Un Tempête, A Tempest, which is an adaptation of The Tempest set in the Caribbean, in which Caliban is an African Caribbean person, or any of these other variations thereupon. Caliban, because he resists Prospero's rule, he is often seen as a symbol of post-colonialism. And, I mean, I think, to me, that's the truth of Caliban. Like, for me, because I played Caliban at a particular time in my own intellectual development, where I was sort of emerging as a proto-post-colonialist, I can't read this play without seeing Caliban, and to a lesser extent Ariel, as a colonized subject. And I'll give you the sort of great speech in which Caliban makes his claim. He says, so Prospero basically calls him out to do this pointless manual labor, right? Because Prospero has this incredible magic. Toward the end of the play, he says he's done all these amazing feats, including up to dabbling in the black arts of necromancy, which takes incredibly powerful magics. But he tells Miranda that they need Caliban. He says, "But as 'tis, we cannot miss him. He does make our fire, fetch in our wood, and serves in offices that profit us." Why? I mean, you've got magic. We know that Ariel can create fire because a few lines earlier he said he did. Why do you need Caliban to do these things? You are a great magician. You could just make fire, or you could bring in the logs by magic, or whatever it is. So this is just about having colonialist control over Caliban. But basically, Prospero calls Caliban in, and he's like, do this menial labor, or I will severely punish you. And what Caliban says is this: "This island's mine by Sycorax my mother, which thou takest from me. When thou camest first, thou strokest me and made much of me, wouldst give me water with berries in it, and teach me how to name the bigger light and how the less that burn by day and night. And then I loved thee, and showed thee all the qualities of the isle. But fresh springs, brine pits, barren place and fertile. Cursed be I that did so. All the charms of Sycorax, toads, beetles, bats, light on you, for I am all the subjects that you have, which first was mine own king. And here you sty me in this hard rock, whilst you do keep from me the rest of the island." This is Caliban's claim to his independence, his authority over this island. And basically, Prospero's response to this is, I was kind to you, and then you tried to rape Miranda, and so you deserve whatever I do to you. We have no necessary reason to doubt that Caliban attempted to have sex with Miranda, presumably against her will. Caliban doesn't overtly deny this. He does say that if he hadn't been prevented, he had peopled else the isle with Calibans. At the same time, this is a colonialist justification, right? This is the imperialist comes to a place that they plan to conquer, and they find a justification. Sometimes that justification is simply, we want this territory, but often the justification for colonialism will be something like, oh, you're uncivilized and we need to civilize you, or the people here, the indigenous people, were not making proper use of the territory or the land or the resources or whatever it was. There's often some element, or multiple elements in many cases, of the act of colonialism is justified because you, the colonized subject, deserve it on some level. So we definitely have that. And it is worth noting that in 1611-ish, when this when this play premiered, you're in the early phases of English colonialism, right? The colony at Jamestown, the first successful or lasting English colony in North America, is founded in 1608. But prior to that, 1586, I think, the Roanoke colony is established in what's now North Carolina. So the English definitely knew about the New World. They were aware of it. And of course, the Spanish and the French had been here longer than that. The Dutch had been here earlier than that, etc., etc. So this is at the beginning portions of European colonialism. And it is really, it's prescient, right? It's sorry. I mean, Shakespeare clearly sort of anticipates not only the approach that colonialists will take, but also post-colonial resistance, in a way. But of course, Caliban is not the hero here. Caliban is ultimately a character who needs to be brought back within the existing social order of monarchy. Prospero is ruler of this island, and ultimately his goal in the Tempest, I got a little bit away from the central plot line, but that's totally fine. Ultimately his goal is to get back to being Duke of Milan, even though, again, when he was Duke of Milan, according to him, he did not do any of the stuff he was supposed to do as Duke. And I think this is really fascinating. What he reports to his daughter, he tells Miranda in Act 1, Scene 2, he's got this long monologue, basically, that's only really interrupted by him saying, "You're not listening," and her saying, "Yes, I am." He describes his own rule this way. He says, "And Prospero, the prime duke, being so reputed in dignity and for the liberal arts without a parallel, those being all my study, the government I cast upon my brother, and to my state grew stranger, being transported and wrapped in secret studies." He says, I didn't do any of the shit I was supposed to be doing as Duke. I made my brother do all of the work. Antonio had to do all of the work of being Duke, but I wanted to still be the Duke. Part of the reason that I'm putting so much emphasis on that actually is because the conference presentation and ultimately the article that I reread this play to write is about Prospero's political positioning. So he, in his own telling, makes himself look like a terrible ruler. But the happy ending of the play is that he basically strands Alonso, Antonio, Alonso's son Ferdinand, and a bunch of other nobles on this island so that he can force them to give him back his dukedom. No indication that he plans to be a better duke. So there's that. But that's the happy ending, is that Prospero gets his dukedom back. He is sort of given his dukedom because he can use magic to enforce his will over others. And we see this across the board. He forces Antonio to give him back his dukedom. He kind of manipulates Ferdinand into falling in love with Miranda, although they seem to fall in love organically. So that's not as much of a problem in my estimation. And the happy ending as regards Caliban is that he is sort of brought back within this monarchical order. He attempts to work with Stefano and Trinculo, who are these two sort of working class alcoholics. Caliban tries to overthrow Prospero, and at the end of the play, he is forced to submit to Prospero. So all of that is happening. But alongside this, so there's that all stuff going on, and this is the sort of romance elements of it, is that we get this happy ending in this structure that looks like it might lead to some sort of tragedy. But the other reason that people often read Prospero as a sort of analog for Shakespeare himself, I think I had mentioned that earlier in the video, is because this is such a meta-theatrical play. There's a bit in which Ferdinand and Miranda are sitting around, they've agreed to get married, and Prospero has Ariel put on this wedding mask, basically, where airy spirits come and perform as Juno and whoever, I forget what all they are. They're this set of Roman deities, all associated with marriage. But there's also this sense of finality to Prospero. So at the end of that pageant, right, he addresses Ferdinand, because basically Prospero is having this pageant put on, and then he's like, oh shit, I forgot about Caliban, Stefano, and Trinculo coming to try and kill me. Pageant over. And Ferdinand is like, wow, that was abrupt. And Prospero says to him, you do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. That's an interesting passage. One of the things, the phrase, the great globe itself, has a double meaning. The globe, of course, meaning the planet as a whole, but also the Globe Theatre, in which, by this point, they were the King's Men that Shakespeare wrote for, in which they performed, Shakespeare's company. And so this is a meditation on the ephemeral nature of theater. And because this is Shakespeare's last solo written play, a lot of people take this to be almost his farewell speech. And this is followed a bit later in the play, where Prospero again, sort of goes through this whole list of major magical accomplishments he's done, including this: graves at my command have waked their sleepers ope and let them forth by my so potent art. Now that's an interesting line, because on the one hand, this would be necromancy, serious, bad black magic, right? But Shakespeare, by his so potent art, has brought forth the dead as well. Richard III, Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, characters from history, have been resurrected on Shakespeare's stage through the art of theater. And that line is followed by this: but this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff and bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than ever did plummet sound, I'll drown my book. This is often read, fairly justifiably in my opinion, as Shakespeare's farewell to the theater. He abjures the rough magic of theater and will drown his book, writing no more.